Hello, everyone, and welcome to our in-depth education for today. My name is Tanya Cross, and we have a focus today on the topic of no more people pleasing. And this is part of our series of trainings that we have on the false self. So last week we looked at the power of you, which was the integrated self, and today we're going to explore a little bit more around the false self. So we're going to explore how you need and how the need for external validation and aspects that we need in our life that we need to be externally validated for, and we get our sense of self, and it's wrapped around that, and how that exposure can influence some of the decision makings that we have, and it can also weaken our inner certainty, which makes a massive difference then when we're wanting to actualize our potential as a coach. Because if we're wanting to grow, we want to perceive ourselves to have the most level of certainty from within and also alignment from within. So in this class, what we're going to cover today is the tension between that external validation that we can find and the internal certainty. And so we're going to look at how seeking approval from others can pull you away from your authentic self. And we'll also look into the exposure of how influence can strengthen or weaken our sense of self. And so that external pressure that we can have, and how sometimes that can either erode or also reinforce a sense of who we are. So if you would love the resource and download that we have for today, type in please in capital letters. We'll have it flying over to you today. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. If you're here live with us today, type live. Welcome to class. So essentially all the classes that we do and all the trainings that we offer inside of this Students of Wisdom is really to help you to actualize your potential as a coach. But a lot of these trainings can also be used just in everyday life outside of being a coach, but we do have a really big focus on helping you to actualize your potential as a coach. And the reason for that is, you know, deep inside that you have a service that you would love to offer the world, and you feel like there's something bigger inside of you. And I know that's how you feel. You're like nodding your head and saying, yeah, that's me. And so what we want to be able to do is remove the emotional roadblocks that we have in the way. And one of those that I found, especially with coaches, is the people-pleasing dynamic. And so people-pleasing really refers to this idea where you prioritize the approval of someone else or a group of people, and you seek validation from them that goes over your own needs. What you feel is true for you, you do what they want you to do. And so you're going to alter your behavior by either suppressing who you are and your identity or your opinions and what really matters. You might sacrifice a sense of self in the journey to please and appease other people. And ultimately, it's also part to do with avoiding rejection. We had a really big training. We did an immersion day on rejection, because it's not something that we can just do one session and that's it. We did a number of hours really deep diving into rejection and working through the roadblocks that coaches have around the fear of being rejected or the fear of being disapproved by people. And so hands up if you're a people pleaser. Yeah, you can go, that's me. And so let me give you some signs of how you'd know if you are a people pleaser. I'm pretty sure you already know, but just in case you're like, maybe you're on the fence and you're not sure, that you agree with whoever's in front of you. It doesn't matter who's in front of you, that you'll find yourself agreeing with them, nodding your head, yes, yes, yes. And so you might learn to be polite with the individual that you're speaking to and just be agreeable. And maybe that's part of a desire to be socially accepted by the person or the individuals that are in front of you. And so that can go beyond just nodding your head and agreeing. You can end up doing some behaviors that are actually not what feels in alignment with you, and your behavior starts to change because you're wanting to fit in with the individuals who are around you. You can find that sometimes people pleasers are very apologetic. I'm sorry, because you don't want to have the disapproval of someone else. So you apologize for the things that you have done or even that you haven't done, and you're apologizing, and you find yourself in that people pleasing behavior, and it's just easier for you to apologize so that you maintain that relationship with them. So there's also the people-pleasing behavior in which you have the inability to say no. No, that's a real struggle for some people with people-pleasing behavior. They have a difficulty to tell other people, no, that's not okay. No, I'm not okay with that. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to coach with you. I don't want to. And so the inability to say no is a real struggle for some people when they have a people-pleasing tendency inside of them. And then that's often coupled though with this aftermath of regrets, because then you reflect and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said, I didn't say no. I didn't say no. I said yes instead. And then there's an element of regret afterwards. That's when you know you're in the people pleasing dynamic. And then also you kind of maybe notice this with some people, maybe you're like this as well, but your personality changes depending on the group that you're with. And so you notice that you shift and morph chameleon-like into different behaviors or different personality traits that will come out in different environments. And so your attitude essentially matches the group that you're with or the individual you're with. And so sometimes people can see this in the dating. Sometimes they can see this with clients, for example. And so we want to notice if inside of us we've got this people-pleasing tendency. We want to know what are the triggers inside of us? How do we know we're actually doing it? Because some people aren't even aware that they're doing it. It's after the fact where the regret comes online and they're like, I can't believe I've been doing that. Or I've been working with a number of people over the years. Some people can go years in people pleasing, maybe even people pleasing a spouse or a business partner, and for years and years and years. But underneath the surface, there's this bubbling up inside of going, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like the way that this dynamic is happening. I don't want to keep on saying yes and them being the leader of your life instead of you leading your life. And that internal bubbling up of resentment and challenges starting to happen inside. And so what we want to be able to do is note inside of us when we are in this people-pleasing dynamic. And so why do we do it? Like if people pleasing is because I've seen it a lot in, say, for example, coaches. So if we look at and just narrow in coaches, because I know that's what you're here for. You're here because you want to actualize your potential as a coach. And so if we look at the dynamic around people pleasing with coaches, it shows up in a number of different ways. I've seen some people do extra long sessions. And so instead of my sessions are 50 minutes, but some people's sessions are an hour, whatever the time frame is. And so when you go into a session and you start working with someone, then you actually notice that you'll give them more time, or maybe it'll be like 2 hours or more time, because you're just trying to people please to make sure they get the result. Even though sometimes that dynamic is playing out that they want more time with you and they're not really interested in getting the result. They just want more time with you. So that can happen. Some people please and say yes to every client that comes through the door, rather than funneling them into another coach that could serve them more wisely, but saying yes anyway. And so then that can find that people end up getting burnout when they say yes to a lot of clients that aren't really their ideal clients. Some people can say yes when it's like getting a cheaper rate, getting a discount, maybe even doing free sessions, but they don't really truly want to. And so, but they're saying yes anyway because they have such a love to serve and a love to help. And which is why sometimes we can have this like kind of grappling between how much do you help someone and people pleasing, and then also losing a sense of self in that journey. And so we want to look at essentially that anytime that we're people pleasing, we're creating this discord or dissonance between our inner self and our outer self. So the inner self is looking for internal certainty. That's what the inner self is doing. But when we seek external validation for the internal certainty, that's where it can get a little bit messed up. So for example, if we have a dynamic in which we need approval of a particular client at the end of a session, good job, yeah, great job, and we need that external validation. Internally, we're not looking for that certainty that we have, okay, that was okay, I could have done something different. We're looking for the external to say, no, tick of approval, you did okay. And then we kind of lose our sense of certainty internally, because we're not looking inside anymore. We're not giving ourselves this internal feedback anymore. We're actually seeking it on the outside. And so this can lead us to doing it, and imagine doing that since you're a child, looking for that external reinforcement from dad, mum, school teachers, jobs. People have it in the corporate world a lot of the time, because it's like, where does the corporate world want you to move and transition? You'd be great in that role, you'd be great in that role. And so there's kind of a lot of morphing and changing. And so what can happen is, when we've done that so much and we're so hardwired, we can erode our sense of connection with ourselves and feel so disconnected, so fractured in our identity, that we then don't even recognize a moment that we feel certain. Because let's say you've spent so long saying yes, people pleasing, making sure everyone else is okay. The internal sense of self and the internal certainty, which tends to be loud when you're not distracted by the outside world, but it diminishes when you are distracted and the outside world is ruling rather than the inside world. The inside world is very, very quiet and you can't really hear it. And so it's because the outside world is so very loud. And so what we have to be able to do is cultivate this internal certainty that we have. And so the external world isn't drowning our sense of self out. Because as coaches, we do not want to lose our sense of identity. We don't want to lose it in our coaching world. We don't want to lose it in our private life, because the loss of identity, especially because we build identity-based businesses, you become an expression, and your business becomes an expression of who you are. And if you've lost your identity, it means you're shaping the world you live in and meeting the expectations of others. It's going to be hard to know who you are. It's going to be hard to find your flow of where to make money. It's going to be hard to find your niche and who to speak to and build a business that you love when you get really fragmented in your sense of self and you're too dependent on the external feedback. So I kind of liken it to someone who's wrapped their self-worth up in their money. And then the moment the money is not there, they've got shattered in their self-worth. Well, this is kind of similar. Well, it is similar in terms of, if we wrap it up in all the praises and accolades we get on the outside world, you take that away and you feel shattered. That's a problem. But also the greater degree of external validation, the internal loss of self, or the internal perceived negative dynamic, because we tend to look for praise on the outside, the internal negative criticism happens on the inside. And so that can be a wonder that a lot of people who have the people pleaser inside of them are also internally quite critical of themselves as well. And so we're also, in one of the big things we looked at around our actualizing our potential as a coach was looking at authority. And we want to essentially be able to step into our authority. If you're wanting to go and create a movement, if you want people to follow you, if you want to inspire people, if you want to make a dent or a tidal wave in your industry and in your niche, then you have to have authority. And you do not have authority if you're looking for the authority on the outside and you've lost the authority on the inside, which happens when you end up people pleasing too much. And especially people pleasing in the business sense, or people pleasing in your niche, doesn't lead you to become an authority in your field. And so this identity dissonance that we have, this discord between who you truly are and the version of yourself you're trying to be, Our people pleasing does not serve you. It doesn't get you to what you're actually seeking and what you're actually wanting. This is actually something that we have a really big focus at Maximum Growth Academy in our classes each and every week. Is we're either directly or indirectly working on your authenticity, helping you to actualize your potential as a coach. And because there's a lot of sometimes layers that we've put upon ourselves and the behaviors that we're doing, they're not really serving us to where we're wanting to go. And so, or we've set ourselves up in a business in which we've people pleased so much. Now we don't want to continue to grow a business that you're people pleasing, because why would you want to do tenfold of that? Why would you want to do 100 clients or 1,000 clients at that level if you're people pleasing? Woof! How hard that would be on life. And so we want to be able to shift all of that so that you can come back into yourself, that you can be okay with pissing some people off along the way. They can deal with their own emotion and their own challenge and be okay in that. I know one of my clients that I've been working with, in terms of sometimes it can be really difficult to have that hard conversation because people pleasing is avoiding hard conversations. But what would happen if you were to lean in and have more difficult conversations with more people? What difference that would make, and how much you'd be more willing to lean into the fight, into the challenge, into the difficultiness, instead of people pleasing and finding the difficulty within. And so I hope you're loving the session. If you are and you'd love the resource, just type in please, and we will get that to you today. So we've looked at that tension between the external validation and the internal certainty. So let's have a look at the how we're exposed to influence, and how it can either strengthen or weaken our sense of self. So first of all, no matter what you do, you're not going to avoid being influenced. We're influenced in our culture, in our gender. We're influenced in the environments or the groups that we're a part of. We're influenced in lots of different ways, and you can't go through life not being influenced by the outside world. And so we can be influenced by the outside world, and we can have moments in which that influence can really strengthen us and really flourish. So for example, we can have a moment where we're exposed, and you come to a 2-day weekend, maybe it's called the breakthrough experience, and you go through that and you're like, whoa, it's changed my life. And so from that, then you're like exposed to this new sense of information and a new paradigm of living, and you're like, okay, great. And so that can strengthen your sense of self. But we can also be exposed to experiences and ways in which it can actually weaken our sense of self. And it really depends on the environment. Some people, for example, I'm working with a particular individual at the moment, and they struggle with alcohol. And so if they go into certain circles of friends and they spend time with certain circles of friends, that's going to weaken their sense of self, because they end up going along, not necessarily people pleasing, but there's an element of people pleasing in there. And the influence actually, and the exposure to that influence actually weakens the sense of self. And so ultimately, if we're going to help ourselves to actualize our potential as a coach, we have to have a solid sense of self. And a solid sense of self in that pathway, if there was a particular pathway we're going there, it's not going to come through people pleasing. And so we almost have to get really comfortable with conflict. We have to get really comfortable with that our sense of self is the most important above everything and everyone else. It is the most important thing that we have to focus on. Because if we can cultivate that inside, if we can be really true with what is important, meaningful, if we can be consistent and constant with that, we're going to build certainty inside. Certainty is your currency as a coach. Certainty is going to bring you more inner voice, a louder inner voice. It's going to give you more confidence when you make decisions in the future and now as well. It's going to help guide you into where your alignment is, because you can't get alignment without certainty. You have to know, you have to have that certainty first. And so certainty essentially is your currency as a coach. And we lose that each time we people please. You're going to get So just remember that that disconnect is weakening your sense of identity, and we want to do everything we can possibly do to strengthen your sense of identity. So we do have a deep dive into this particular topic in our Maximum Growth Academy class, which is on the topic called on being exposed. And we're focusing on the false self, because essentially that's the false self when you people please. We're going to have a deep dive into that much more. I have given you a handout though to have a little look into what it is like in some of our classes in our Maximum Growth Academy. If you've thought about it, and it is something that you would love to come in and join our community. We have an amazing group of coaches who are all working towards the same common goal, which is actualizing your potential as a coach. If you'd love to come and join us, please reach out to either Justin or myself. We'd love to have you in the sessions. Well, that's it for us for today. Hopefully you've taken some value out of that. Write in your comments, share below. I'd love to hear your thoughts from the session for today. Next week, we're going to have a deeper dive into vulnerability. So I'd love to see you there. So have a beautiful day wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to seeing you in the next perfect time. Thanks, team.